Hi there, and welcome to Talking True. In today's episode, I have a lovely guest joining me. His name is Ishtar Howell. He's based in Portugal. He defines himself as a meditation teacher, a near death experiencer, and a gardener. So, Ishtar, thank you for joining me today. It's great to have you here.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Now, let's start with maybe your awakening process or what led you to that point, or, what the whole story was.
Oh, I think for me, even though I didn't know it at the time, there was lots of stuff going on in childhood. There were lots of mornings just sitting in my crib before I knew how to walk, before I knew how to speak, sitting in my crib and just kind of meditating without knowing that's what I was doing. I would just look at the curtains across from my crib, these kind of pretty blue curtains in the pre-dawn light and in the dawn light, and just kind of, breathe in, breathe out, and I would get these wonderful flows of blissful and joyful and pleasurable sensations that would like flow through my body up and down and would have this sense of being sort of in the sort of the wood and plastic structure of my crib and in my blanket and in the curtains. And then my mother would come in the room and I would have a sense that, I was also in some strange way inside my mother too, and
Mhm.
in the cabinet, and it was all very pleasurable. And so that was going on. It was until maybe I was like 17 and I was a senior in high school and I was in a AP psychology class and we got to the chapter on memory. And I came to a certain line that said, "I'm not supposed to have any memories before age 2.5." And I was like, "Huh."
Yeah.
And so because I had in my mind quite a few, including learning how to walk, and all the times I would fall down, and how my mother and my sister would sort of be on their knees, kind of 5 feet away, and trying to encourage me to, you know, uh, come toward them, and falling down, and I think probably seeing the ghost of my great grandmother enter my room when I was a little baby, and seeing peacocks out of my stroller on a certain trip and being carried around, and early childhood was in many ways a very, very, very enjoyable in that sense. And I think it wasn't long that I was reading that psychology textbook that I think it was my first brother-in-law who gifted me Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi.
Oh, yes.
And so it must be like a few pages in to the start, and he's right there talking about, and I had his very early memories, and then he was saying like it's very common for those who'd been previously yogis to have very early memories. It's like, well, thank you for offering me a potential pathway of explanation for what was going on.
Yes,
I
I had the same, exact
Oh,
same.
really? Oh, that's
Uh,
interesting.
Plus, with the reading the book, there was a recognition through reading the book. Oh,
Mm.
okay, this makes sense. So,
Mm.
go on, sorry to interrupt.
And then I think there are other things, signs that I did not see as signs at the time. They're just normal life. There's nothing special about it. Like for instance, how I would once I got into the actual bed from the crib, and I was sleeping there, I would do this sort of a breathing exercise, but not as an exercise, where I would kind of breathe in a certain way from my stomach, sort of hold my breath, and then exhale. No fancy dancy yogic techniques, no visualization or anything. Just, but what I would start to feel, maybe within a few seconds, a few cycles, is this kind of pleasurable energy coming up from the base of my spine and rising up through my body and going out the top of my head. And I would reach a certain point where, like, if the pleasure got like too great, I couldn't quite stay in my body or stay conscious in my body because there's too much nice stuff happening up here. So when I was ready to go to sleep, that's what I'd do. And I'd usually I would just go into like probably a really nice sleep because I'd always wake up, I think, with a lot of pep in my step the morning after. But sometimes I would consciously fly out the top of my head, and I would go out the back wall of my house, and I'd be flying over the
Yes,
maple tree in the
yes.
back.
I used to do the same thing. I used to leave
Oh,
either through the crown of the head or through the heart chakra when I was very, very young. And then the other thing that would happen is just before I falling asleep,
yeah.
I'd start watching the breath coming in and out, and then I'd feel my awareness. It was it felt like it was my body, and obviously it was the body of the supreme self or consciousness, right?
Yeah.
Expanding and then
Oh,
including everything and everyone, and it would continue on and out. So I was having the same kinds of experiences very when I was very, very young.
wow. That's really cool. Yeah, actually, you gave some your description sort of filled in some of the blanks of why it was pleasurable for me because now I remembered it was like I felt like I was a billows.
Yes.
And sort of the bigger the billows expanded,
Mm-hmm.
in many ways the greater the pleasure. So
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yes.
I'll call it naturalistic, untrained meditation
Mm-hmm.
happening, and then like m most of us at around age 6 or 7, we got into a little personality. It was weird. I sometimes claim that there was some agency in that simply because I remember being at my kindergarten parent-teacher conference, which I think is a really silly thing to have parent-teacher conferences that early. But I was there. Here's my mother. There's my teacher, and the tells my mother he's got a great personality. I had no idea what that. I hadn't
No.
encountered that word yet. I didn't know what it was. I mean, even though I was encountering a lot of words, so on our walk home, I asked my mother, "What's a personality?" Because I really wanted to know what it was that was great, that
Yes.
was going on. And then she explained it to me, and like a light bulb went off in my skull because I'd been very curious why with the adults, and even to a certain extent my older sister, but mostly with the adults, what I was, what I felt inside them was often different than what they would say and come out of their
Yes.
mouth.
Yes. I mean, I so relate to all of this because I had the same exact experiences when I was a
Huh.
kid. When I was very, very young, I used to know what they were feeling
Mm,
and what their mental health was like. And it would
yeah,
confuse me because they would present, you know,
yeah.
as being happy and relaxed and peaceful or whatever it was, you know. And when my mom or my dad would say, "How's it going?" and "How are you?" they'd say, "Good, good." And I could feel it as if
Mm.
it was inside, you know, me. I was them, so to speak. And so it was I was very confused. It's like, well, that isn't accurate. That isn't right because I know they're feeling upset or angry or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
it was the same.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, the light bulb was like, oh my God, I didn't use the word filtering mechanism because I didn't have those words yet, but that was the concept that went off in my head. It's like, oh, everyone's got a filtering mechanism. And then I thought, what great fun. I'll have a filtering mechanism because I got to join into this. Now that they've convinced me to talk, which is something I didn't want to do either.
No.
I didn't want to learn language, and then I didn't want to learn writing or reading. Um, I kind of just I caved because I liked food too much, probably, and other things. I think so. They had my number. Uh,
Can I stop you? How did you get on with numbers and all of that? Because I had incredible difficulty learning to tell time because it made no sense. Because I was having out of body experiences and,
right.
you know, all of those kinds of moving into different states of awareness and different states of beingness. And
Well,
so the whole kind of concept of time was beyond me. I think I was at least 8 or 9 years old before I could grasp wrap my head around.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, that's where because I know a lot of people. Well, not a lot, but I know others like who are having the experiences we were sharing here and more. And I kind of stick out as maybe as a bit of an outlier in conversations because I was whiz bang at that.
Oh,
Right,
okay.
right away. In fact, crazy for a while. What I did once was I got very enamored with it, and I decided I will program my subconscious to tell time to the second, and without me having to, so it's a
Yes.
subconscious process. So I did that, and then and that basically was how good I was for a long time. I could say I think it's 3:37 and 48 or something like that, and I'd be very good. So like logical and mathematical intelligence, that kind of having a handle on the world, even though I think I was rather out of my body for other reasons,
Yeah.
was there, and so yeah, the left brain was able to kind of keep up with the right
Hmm.
and not necessarily smother it either. So they were both kind of going.
Basically, from what you've been saying, is this kind of, you didn't have a, like many people have this kind of radical shift in a moment in time, so to speak. There may have been things that led to that, but for you, it was apparent from the beginning that
I,
yeah.
oh, I lost it. I mean, didn't fully lose it. I mean, I lost it from about 7 to 13. I mean, gradually lost it, and that was fine because I wanted to do well in school, and I was quite shocked by how cruel the other children were to each other and to myself. And so that kind of sent me out of my body, and I invested like anybody else would, or most people, is like, okay, I'm going to play the egoic game, and I'm going to do the thing. And I think by 13 I was pretty good at it.
Yes.
And so at about, then the rug got pulled out from under me. Second to last day of school of my seventh grade year. I broke my arm in the evening. I'm talking to my mom, and suddenly I ask her if she's going to die soon, and that came out of nowhere and surprised me as the words came out my mouth. Surprised her too, even though she's a very formidable woman.
Yeah.
And so that was strange when I saw her, because I think there was some juice in those words. And then she said, like, of course not. No, not for a long time. And I said, okay, yeah, why I don't know. I'm worried about that. And next day, we get in a car accident. She dies.
Oh
And
my gosh.
yeah, it's like, and in the process of that car accident, I was, basically had a near-death experience.
Oh,
Uh, I didn't view it as such for years. I just thought, well, it was very transformative. I don't care what to call it. It doesn't really matter. Um, Basically because I was looking over to talk to her, looking to my left from the passenger seat, and all of a sudden, a car that neither of us saw because it was behind another car that was going the proper speed limit that we had nothing to worry about. All of a sudden, there was a big old Lincoln town car going at really high speed, uh, like probably less than a foot from impact. I mean, it was so close that I was very surprised because I was quite, in those 6 years, I'd become quite afraid of death. Like death was really like, I mean, it was a very frightening proposition. And so in that moment, I would have fully suspected to tighten up and get really frightened, but I didn't. And instead, I thought the word shit, like, but it was wasn't tightening up as, it was just like, oh, my number's up, okay, and then I felt myself sinking down into something, and had the thought, I really thought this life was going to go longer than 13 years, and that surprised me the way it was phrased too. Why am I saying this life as if there's other ones? I mean, I was a believer in reincarnation by that point, but it wasn't something I had any kind of certitude about. I mean, if I had more certitude, maybe I wouldn't have been so afraid of death. But and so then the life review happened, which was also very surprising. I'd read about the phenomena. I was really fascinated in it, but I was very skeptical. I was like, come on, how can you have all of that, in the space of,
yes.
milliseconds? And then there it was, in better detail than I remembered it or even lived it in the first place. The entire life, every moment, and not only that, but with some kind of omniscient, objective guide, narrator, God, my higher self. I'm pretty loose with how to frame that, but the thing is, I knew that presence. I was actually would often sort of argue with it from time to time, because every now and then it would come in and say like, yeah, not a good idea. And I'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
shut up. I'm going to do this, and then it would not be a good
Yes.
idea.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. I used to have the same thing. I mean, a few,
really, yeah,
yeah. Oh, yes. Where I'd hear this voice that was so loud, and it felt like it came from inside of me, and it was all around me.
yeah, yeah.
And one of the phrases was, "You can't go on like this." And sure enough, there was a reason. So yeah, so I'm with you with that. With that, yeah, it's really really amazing. So the near death experience, obviously.
Yeah, it sent me into samadhi. I mean, of course, I didn't have that word at the time. And there I mean, a very deep samadhi and a very expanded one, in the sense of having, no boundaries, no I and thou distinction, no self and world distinction, just feeling omnipresently everywhere, and even the thoughts in my head at that point, because I was not a deep New Ager by
Yeah.
any means at
Yeah.
13. The thought was like it's all been love the whole time.
Yes.
That was the I mean that was the thought, and then wham, there comes the impact. I'm surprised I didn't have a bruise on my head or really many injuries at all, because I remember having my head slammed into the glass of the passenger seat. Um, there we went. Uh, uh, in the aftermath, of course, I had sort of a dual experience because I was very close to my mother.
Mm-hmm.
I even on like a person to person level, which to a certain degree, like as individuals who are who they are, it was wonderful to talk to her. I mean, for the most part, I could actually have very go as deep as I needed to
Yeah.
on most things. And so that was hard to have her gone, and I went through all the stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, puts out in a list.
Mm.
Remembering, anger, and didn't necessarily have a solid belief in a God figure at that age either. I was sort of an agnostic with a lot of different
Mm-hmm.
possible notions, and I mean, I was punching the wall, and at the same time, what was strange was there was such a calm in me. It felt like there was a place that was always turned on. I was doing nothing to maintain it. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't leave the space if I tried. Sometimes I tried and I'd start laughing, but the laughter would be bellowing from the place. And it was just like total silence and joy and bliss. And I thought that was shock. So I got my mom had trained to be a psychologist, and so she had all these books, and I was including Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, which I pulled off, and I was trying to find shock stuff about shock. It got to a certain point where it's like, oh wait, I don't think this is exactly shock, and so I didn't know what it was. At one point, I was about to ask my dad if he was experiencing the bliss too. Before I could finish the word dad, a deep voice inside gave me the answer. It says, no, he is absolutely not, and you should really keep this to yourself. Don't
Yes.
don't let the adults into this period of time. You need to spend it sort of kind of enjoying and savoring and soaking up and playing with this space. And so I kind of had in a non-confusing, non-split way, a bit of a double life. So for a few months in the summer, I mean, I was rejoined my baseball team. I'd go to sleepovers. I'd go to movies with friends. I'd do a lot of stuff. I wasn't putting on any kind of show for the first time in a long time. But I mean, from the exterior, I seem mainly normal.
Mm-hmm.
And yet inside, it's like when I was drinking like the Mr. Pibb while watching The Fifth Element at the theater,
Mm-hmm.
like that wasn't just a Mr. Pibb, and the seat wasn't just a seat, and there was something big and vast which I had no accounting for.
Mm-hmm.
And that was cool. At a certain point, somebody who I didn't know very well, which is why it was strange, approached me in the school playground, a big park, and somehow they had noticed that I was different than I was before in the way that I was. And it was a he, and he said like, oh, how can I get in on that? I said, well, you just got to go like and almost die, maybe get into a car accident. And then we laughed because it's really dicey advice.
Yes.
And as soon as I said that, something deep within me actually kind of knew I'm gonna kind of forget this place again. Not fully, but I'm gonna kind of forget it because I need to come back to it in a systematic way. That when somebody asks me in the future, I can actually kind of give less dodgy, means of
Yes.
getting in a car accident,
Yes.
hanging yourself but surviving. I don't know,
Yes. Yes.
what it
Yes.
would
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
be. Yeah.
That,
So yeah.
yeah, that's amazing. I mean, my story is kind of, I didn't go through a near-death experience or anything like that. And I stayed in that state. But when I got to the age of 14, I just had this feeling I just can't keep living in this way. And I remember praying and looking up to the sky and saying to God, please take this away. I
Mm,
can't do this anymore. And just take it from me, because I just wanted to be kind of a normal
Yeah.
teenager and all of those things. So everything just kind of closed down, or what, however you want to call it, and then it just kind of reawakened or opened up or whatever, when I was in my early 30s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
yes. So anyway, the parallels are really fascinating.
Interesting, interesting, interesting. Yeah, there was a lot of yo-yoing in my life. So it's, as a narrative, it's not exactly like so linear and progressive. There's a lot of like, okay, let's close this down. And so I went the next year. I did lose it. I mean, it was very sudden too. It was not a gradual thing. It was like waking up one day and being like pretty foggy.
Hmm.
And then the pain was immense because I
Yeah.
was left basically with any grief that hadn't been very quickly processed in the previous months was like so raw, and things were like having, it felt like having salt being poured in open wounds,
Mhm.
with a lot of little things.
Yeah.
I would wake up crying every morning. I would wake up. I had a deep, as a kid, I had a deep irrational belief that somehow through the powers of my mind or consciousness, I could figure out time travel.
Oh,
This,
yeah.
and so with that, being pre-established, so like I'm gonna go back with my conscious and time travel back and live in a different timeline. I'm gonna go back to June 5th, 1997. I hadn't seen the film Somewhere in Time yet, where
Hmm.
he does a similar thing. And some mornings I would wake up and I'd be so clear in my consciousness, I'd be think I did it. I did it, and then reality would come crashing, and it was just, oh. So I had a year, and I was also apparently living as the normal me from before, but it was like a really ill-fitting costume.
Yeah.
Like I was really trying to do it not just for myself, but in a way for my family. I wanted to, like, I got to put myself back together. I got to get back on track. I had plans. I need to get with those again. Time's of the essence. Can't screw around.
Hmm.
And so the next summer before high school, I went into a metaphysical bookstore for the first time. And that's when some people would say I was fully lost. No, I went in with my sister, opened up a book in the back at random, and it was on meditative experiences of Himalayan yogis.
Oh,
And just on the page that I was on, it was describing basically stuff that sounded very similar to what I'd experienced.
yes.
Uh, I was still skeptical because I'm like, well, I'm like a nobody in a nobody town. I mean, I think I had a fairly inflated view of myself, but still, I was like, let's get real. I'm kind of a no. I'm just some Caucasian American kid in Wisconsin, right?
Hmm.
And yet the something in the words drew me, and so I was hanging out at that metaphysical bookstore and reading anything I could get, in a pell-mell, ad hoc, no strategy, but I met wonderful beings there who were the local psychics and healers. And for some reason, in that sweet spot of the late 1990s, in that little town of mine, we had some great ones. And they were very big-hearted to spend time with a 15-year-old, kind of like zealous
Yeah.
but sort of confused uh,
Yes.
guy. And I didn't know that I loved sitting with them because basically they had presence.
Hmm.
They had known all of them samadhi, and some of them in a kind of an ongoing sense.
Hmm.
And so I didn't know that that was what I was drawn to, but looking back, that's exactly what I was drawn to. And I think they were catching me in it too, with me being kind of unconscious, because as a teenager, I think I was probably had the busiest mind and the most hormonal firing I'd had ever in my life,
Hmm.
in terms of everything that was going on. And it took me about 3 years, but I think, it took me 3 years to become a very consistent meditator. I knew at 15 that that's what I had to do. I was afraid of it. At 17, I decided to do it. And I started with, I was offered to learn transcendental meditation, but I turned it down. So one of my mentor friends named Pam, who is also a local psychic, as well as a TM teacher, she offered me a sweet deal, like just rake my leaves for the fall. That's an activity I liked anyways.
Hmm.
And it's like, but something in me was like, I'm not. That seems a familiar path, but I'm not meant to go there. So I didn't. And then I had this. She introduced me to a dear friend now passed, named Austin, who was a quote unquote walk-in. And uh, he had a I spent lots of time going to his house. Weird, strange things would happen there. He was what was interesting was that small town, everybody knows everyone's business. Before he, died, and he, as he says, I walked in and the old guy left. The old guy was what he called the town asshole, or one of the town assholes. And boy, did I hear stories from my dad when he's like, "You're hanging out with who?" It's like,
That's
and other
funny.
people's like, he was like that guy's no good, and so he would tell, and apparently the story was he went to the old guy, as he said, went to the hospital to get a do the stress test for a heart attack, and
Yes.
apparently it was a little bit too late because he had a massive heart attack while doing the stress
Oh,
test,
wow.
and died. And from his description, what he told me was, yeah, he was rising out, and I kind of tagged in. And he, the way he framed it was like he is a higher octave of the same soul or whatever. He had all these stories that he told, but the main thing was that he had a very sudden, very quick shift of interests, personality, stuff like that. That kind of, you know, proceeded to happen. By the time I met him, like he had etheric jaguars running around his backyard, which I ran into once, and he knew about it.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, yeah, I would go in there and be just in samadhi 50 feet from his house. Um, and I didn't know that that was what was I was being in, but I would sometimes just go and take a nap on his couch while he was under his truck in his garage fixing and say, Austin, I gotta go because I was starting to have all this energy moving through my body, and it was causing headaches that I've never had headaches in my life, and they were weird. And so that was my solution. That was my RX, was just go onto his couch for 20 minutes. I'd be right as rain,
Brilliant.
and then go back to being, kind of a halfway teenager, halfway disorganized spiritual seeker of a sort. And yeah, that was it was a great time to be that kind of teenager in that kind of place.
Were there other big shifts that brought you to where you are now, or how would you kind of detail that?
I think the biggest one, if I were to make, I mean, there's such things that were going so gradually, was one, deciding to become an ascetic at 17 and say, like, because I'm Scorpio, so I have to do everything 200% or otherwise I should just kill myself,
Yeah.
whatever. That
Yes.
is a weird psychology to walk around with, but, effective. And so I said, well, we got to start meditating 6 hours a day and take cold showers in the morning and at 3 a.m. and wake up at and do all this. And we got to get ready so that when we go to high school next year, we can do our studies and do our 6 hour meditation program. So I decided to do that. I put myself through hell. I remember like crying. I was crying as I was forcing myself to walk into the ice cold shower several mornings. I was fasting too much. It wasn't necessarily like the best conceived path, but I needed to do it.
Hmm.
I think I needed to burn it out of my system in a way. And then the big shift was first being given that Yogananda book, opening it up and reading it was like a meditation for me at that space. I think I was ripe for it. I'd opened the book and like felt like there's a door beams into my heart and whatever else. And I was searching for a monastery to go live in. Instead of colleges, I wanted to go live in a monastery for, the next year. And I was
Hmm.
getting their brochures. They would send me brochures in the mail and be like, "Oh, this one's beautiful, but it's not the right music. It's not the right fit." And so then I came to a part of Yogananda where he says, like, if you pray to Babaji, like he'll hear it, and I thought, well, it's worth a shot, So like I did a couple prayers to Babaji, and one of them was basically had this experience of it felt like having a ball of honey put down the top of my head, very woo. Now, and in this experience, I was like, very skeptical. I was like, okay, is this really Babaji or is this somebody who has nefarious intent? What is going on here? I don't want to be possessed like the girl from The Exorcist. Uh,
Yes.
and it's like, okay. But then, I was like, no, let's go with this. This feels way too good and way too similar to these other experiences. And, it's basically then a pitch frequency formed in my head and kind of a voice in quotes said, just pay attention to this frequency. Next time it comes around, that'll be your signal that this is your dharma. This is your sadhana.
Hmm.
We're gonna help you out. I thought I was expecting a simple answer like, go to one of these Kriya Yoga places because the book was such a good advertisement for Kriya Yoga. But no, it turns out I was not meant for the Kriya Yoga path. 2 days later, I was coming home and there was my first brother-in-law and my sister on the front porch. And they invited me to a meditation class that upcoming weekend. And I was famous for saying like no to all social engagements in order to effectively do my 6 hour program in school. And I was like, yes. And so had knowing nothing about the technique, really, I didn't ask many questions. I thought like, okay, I don't know, we'll see. I got my own thing. So we'll see about this. Even though, the Babaji stuff had happened, I was still kind of like, I don't know about that. And I went to this thing, and it's this practice called the Ishayas Ascension. I'd actually stumbled upon it before on the internet, but their website said stress release. So as a 16-year-old, like, I'm not interested in stress release.
Right.
What kind of boring stuff is that? Uh, and I did the first technique, and boom. I mean, within 30 seconds. And it was a different sort of meditation than I'd been doing, mostly like concentration meditations, and kind of I'd become a little bit hardcore
Mm-hmm.
in that way, and kind of jagged in a little bit. And this was an effortless practice where I'm basically thinking, uh, little prayers of appreciation, gratitude, and love, which seemed hokey to me. They were in English, so I didn't think it was going to work because I thought only Sanskrit and maybe Hebrew
Yeah.
were good meditative, vehicles. But then I found it like, what the hell's going on? And so that most of that weekend, I was right back in sort of the post NDE pocket, and that I had that was I was set. I had a sadhana. I had a honeymoon period for maybe a few weeks. Then I had a lot of tension starting to release. And so it was just thankfully I developed such kind of discipline and perseverance from being an ascetic that this was like, no problem. Okay, fine. What about you? And so 3 months later, yeah, three. It seemed like longer than that when I lived it, but 3 months later, I was on the Oregon coast in an ashram, and so there's like a gradual shifts from there. I mean, I remember when I arrived, they were telling me, you need to find. They didn't call it samadhi. They used specialized language. They go, you need to find the ascendant. It's their word for the transcendent, whatever. Um, and so like I had my marching orders and I was searching. I was like, okay, I gotta find this. And sometimes the young teachers who'd just gotten out of their long retreats would, play treat me as a guinea pig, which I was, very, happy with. I was like an 18-year-old mascot at this place. And so they say, you're in it right now. And then I get so pissed off because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm experiencing samadhi, right? What are you talking about right now? Could you show me? Looking back, they were on many of those occasions, I realized, oh, they were right. I just didn't know what I was exactly looking because it was too subtle. And it was not something I could type A myself into, accruing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the deeper experiences where it kind of sort of, I experienced it and it stuck around, was chopping onions in the cafe that we owned and operated, like I'd done many nights previously. And all of a sudden, I just realized, wait a second, like I haven't had a thought for I have no idea how long, and I'm as big as the whole cafe.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, oh my God, what? And and that stuck for some time. My experience was not as expansive as that perpetually ongoing, but something of it, some portion of it was accessible, even in really shitty, stressful, de-stressing sessions, which were frequent because there were some days I would be crying
Mm-hmm.
all day, and some days all the judgments of self and others, I called them judgment days in a non-comedic way. I'd say like, because I'd be thinking in my head, know how much I could swear in your program, but
Yeah. Yes.
there'd be a lot of four-letter words coming out
Mm-hmm.
about everything, and fine, sweating it off and then, going deeper. And at a certain point, I got to go into a long retreat program, which is I'd been working for in a work exchange. And then it was just, God, that was so nice. It was just, for 5 months of straight meditation, 10 to 12 hours a day with the eyes closed. after I'd been a very sort of active, working, open-eyed meditator quite a bit, which I think was fantastic preparation to be disciplined and in that world and then go into this. And then there was just sitting back in the big vast witness.
Mm-hmm.
The days are just sort of feeling like in meditation, I am sitting on top of the precipice of the depths, sinking down into it, staying for who knows how long, coming up into those very subtle states right on top, sinking back down. That was like getting the best kind of internal massage I could dial up. And then at some point there was sort of multi-perspectival awareness going on, the sense of being in the walls and looking at myself from the wall,
Yes.
from the wall in a non-confusing way,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and more in my body than I'd ever been in my life. And
Yes.
this, yeah, this practice was called ascension, but in my case, and I think in most of the cases of people I've taught, I could rename it descension,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the main effect. Is I had become I had really reacted at age 7 and really, wanted the world at an arm's length because it did not feel like at all a safe place. And so without really knowing it, I had parts of my awareness that were more or less, if you could describe it spatially, 10 feet up.
Mm-hmm.
And so doing this practice in that environment was like, some days I'd be like, wait, have I ever really felt my hands before? Like, uh, and it's just I slept on that because I was good at sports. And so it's like how I was good at sports while being 10 feet above my body, I
Yeah.
don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. Yes. So, all of that said, where are you at today in terms of, I don't know, I
Oh, yeah,
suppose the articulation of what this is.
yeah, well, yeah. There was some more yo-yoing, but yeah, I think after I was with 6.5 years doing an ashram thing. Then I had a kind of a dark night of the soul that corresponded with leaving the ashram, a bit culty, I have to say, going to university, stepping away from, yeah, almost as an experiment was what I was experiencing real? That was the question. And then when I got to suffer again, I was like, oh my God, this is suffering. I'd forgotten
Mm-hmm.
like how bad,
Yes.
this could be. Like, whoa. And that was actually a big gift. That was an extreme gift because I had some real like experimental data. So like at a certain point, my Saturn return 29, yeah, it was kind of a shit or get off the pot sort of thing. I was kicked out of my body, not being able to breathe in bed, and I was walking towards the door to the other side, and just was given a choice, and I went and got back in my body, and from that moment, it was like everything started coming online again, and so it was more or less a few years until the witness came back and became sort of a stable. It's like, oh wow, hello, a stable part. I had to de-stress and take a bunch of like new stress out of my system and kind of work out a lot of anger
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. And then all the celestial stuff started to happen. So then it's like, oh wait, oh my God, like God, that flower is so beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
and do that. And then I was thinking around 2017, I came back to the more unitive experiences, and those sort of stuck around.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's basically, I think, the terrain I'm cruising in these days. If I'm kind of using the transcendental meditation model to, organize those steps or whatever stages or gears. But yeah, it's uh,
It's quite the kind of journey or whatever you want to call it. But and everything you've detailed is really highlighting the importance of doing the shadow work or whatever you want to call that. Otherwise, the conditioning, old patterns, belief systems that you've inherited from your family will be wanting to come to the forefront and kind of hijacking any mystical experience or doubting it or trying to analyze it or dismiss it or repress it or whatever, right?
sure,
So
yeah,
that has tremendous value, and it can be really painful and very, very difficult to actually face the things that we've tried to repress or turn away from. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you spoke about that, because it's the most, I would say, the most unpalatable thing about having a shift of consciousness is really being confronted with,
Oh my
you
God.
know, the things we don't want to see or accept, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I'm still, because there are places of pain and grief that I don't think I could have been a better meditator or better yogi at some times, and I would never, no matter how much I went, I'd never have touched them, and so there's still like areas of grief that come up, and there they are, and also ancient tensions that I can't really exactly put words to, that
Hmm.
that that can only be sort of felt into and accepted,
Yes.
and not turned away. And so yeah, that's I was glad that my teachers, all of the teachers, were very, very good, at least with me. They're very, very good about not encouraging bypassing,
Yes.
and like encouraging feeling, and
Yeah.
and and like not pushing it away. There was a lot of appreciation of Shakti in her
Mhm.
many ways, forms, and activities. And so the healing process was very much seen as this is an essential Shakti process. If you don't let this happen, you'll kind of be fucked up potentially.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Or find yourself in positions, that we've seen where we have, spiritual teachers who have all kinds of psychological issues that they haven't dealt with, and then they come crashing down, and it just never works. So,
Yeah, a laundry list of those, and
mhm, yeah.
yeah,
So it's important to honor everything, include it all, welcome everything, and
yeah,
and be willing to meet and greet it. Otherwise, we're kind of fooling ourselves, especially if we're trying to meditate our disappointment, grief, anger, or whatever away, right? And just,
yeah.
you know, move on.
I had like a mini intense lesson of that in actually the year 2016. Is in that year, it felt like I was getting shit on from all directions, and I had subtle crutches that I didn't even quite know were subtle crutches. One of the subtle crutches was that usually I could find joy. I mean, not even fake joy, but like real joy, and it
Yeah,
would distract me from maybe being able needing to feel as deeply into certain things as I needed to. And so then when I had I'll call it the gift now, but it didn't feel like that then, the gift of just having everything go wrong at once in the worst ways. I felt like, I don't know if you remember Buster Keaton, the
yeah,
silent film star. He'd always have houses falling around him and he's falling off stuff, and he had that kind of, that deadpan. I can't do his facial expression. That's what I felt like internally, and so I only had one option. It was basically feel everything. There's nothing you can do except feel everything and be in presence.
yes,
That's it. That's it. You can only lay back and just hands off and kind of get dumped on. And
yes,
and it turned out that you know uh, the next year, that's where the unitive experiences and interesting sorts of I don't know, multi-locational. I know it sounds fancy, but sort of this kind of this sort of merging into stuff happened. And I think it only happened on the basis of being willing to allow the process of all of that, just pain and rage and frustration and whatever else to play through.
yes. And yeah, and because those things are our allies when we begin to just let them in and embrace them and meet them, and
Yeah.
obviously not drop anchor there too, because that can.
That's it. Yeah, I've definitely seen friends do that, and himself included, do
Yes,
that before. Yeah, yeah,
it's easy
yeah,
to do. Wow, wow.
yeah,
All of that is amazing. Your whole story and the way you've kind of moved around and been led and directed, in the highest way, and then really having to face everything, it's really profound. So in terms of the way you work with people, do you teach
Hmm.
meditation in Portugal, and are you running
Uh,
retreats?
I teach all. I mean, haven't run a retreat in a little bit. Kind of keen to do another one soon. But teach in person, usually not in Portugal, but definitely would be happy to if people coming here just for that. Do a lot of it online, which is sort of a new thing as of 7 years ago for me. So that's not that new anymore. But teach online. I teach my Ishayas Ascension practice, both in person and online. Do a lot of teaching in the UK.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's a 2.5 hour flight from Lisbon to
Nice.
London. So and it's usually very affordable. So it's an easy enough place to get to. And yeah, and sometimes we do longer retreats. Like it's fun, especially here in Portugal. We'll rent a place for a month. Some people are very, very lucky and they're able to take a month off for meditation, and we're there to, be of service. And then some people come in for a week or 10 days or 2 weeks, and it's just a lovely, lovely little meditation spaceship gets formed. Usually in some pretty Portuguese place, because most of the country is very, very pretty, whether it's the north or the middle or the south. And then we were in India a few years ago, so we do teacher trainings as well,
Oh, okay.
longer when there's enough people who are interested. So it was actually just kind of funnily happenstance that a few years ago we ended up in Tiruvannamalai, South India.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and that was a lovely time, and so we may do another one in South India because especially Tiruvannamalai feels like home, and we have really really friends there now,
Mhm.
and so yeah, and then my other line of work is I became a professional astrologer uh,
Oh, wow.
10 years ago. I professionalized. What I'm interested in, what I think people tend to connect with me for, is that there is life purpose stuff. In a chart, I can kind of see like what the shape of a spiritual path might be. Uh, and I often see like, okay, this person, it needs to be more somatic stuff, probably going on.
Hmm.
This person, definitely mantras. And this person, this sort of thing. So uh, that's fun. I love to sing the songs of people's souls
Oh,
in those chart readings. That said, very early on in the practice, when I started looking at these two-dimensional charts, I would get kind of overpowered by imagery and visions and sort of very sort of particular dreamscapes, and I would start sharing those. At the time, it was like not pressure because they were my coworkers who were paying me with like an iced chai and a sandwich.
sure.
So, it's very you could feel very like loose that you're not gonna, screw up. And when they liked those things way better, and it kind of became very interesting that I would sometimes pick up on like recurrent dreams that people have been having their whole life, or this or that, and so that became part of the practice.
Oh,
So
beautiful. Wonderful. So, do you have a website, or how can people get hold of you?
one of them is www.ascension-meditation.com. That's for the meditation hat. And the intuitive astrologer hat is awakened light astrology, a lot of syllables.com. And then I have a Substack, and I have a sort of a nascent YouTube channel. And there's probably other things. I'm very active on Facebook, for instance, which maybe not everyone's favorite part of the internet, but
Hmm.
I've been there a while, so yeah.
Excellent. So, I'll have all of these things in the show notes actually, so people can just click and go, and they can check you out and check out, what you're offering and all of those things.
Mm.
So, which would be great. Um, So I think we're kind of at the end of our time together for today. I'd love to invite you back if you would like to come back and we can have, a continued conversation.
I believe we have a lot we can talk about.
Yes, we sure
And
do.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
so many parallels. It's really amazing. Really
Yes,
amazing.
yes, it is. Yeah, it rather is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you go to Cities in the Sky at night? Did you go to night school?
Yes.
You
Yes.
too? Okay, so
Yes. Yeah.
we definitely got more to talk about because that was a big part of this
Yeah.
life too. Yeah.
Initiations from master yogis and
Okay. Yeah.
shamans and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So yeah,
Okay.
there was a lot. So I could see why there's a resonance here. But we can leave things where they are for today. And I just want to say thank you so much, Ishtar, for joining me. This has been really great. I really loved every second of this conversation. And thank you so much for sharing so deeply. I'm sure a lot of viewers will resonate.
So, well, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you watch the live, fantastic. If you're watching the recording, that's great too. Please leave a comment, share if you would like to. If you haven't subscribed, you know what to do. And for the time being, take it easy, be well, and bye for now.